Welcome once again, my friends, and thank you for stopping by to listen to an old storyteller. Today we have a story from Portugal, and the title of this story is The White Dove. There was once a charming maiden who had a crabbed old uncle for her guardian, for both her parents were dead. He fastened her up in a room at the top of a high tower where she saw no one but the servant who waited on her. But one day, as she sat at the window, a fine young prince came riding by on his white horse, and, seeing her sitting at the window, fell in love with her. After that he came every day, and she would lean out of her window and talk to him. And, as she could not get out, they soon discovered a way by which he could come in. She had very long and lovely hair, and she would let down her golden plaits so that with their help he was able to climb up to her window and visit her. One day an old witch happened to be passing by just as the prince was climbing up, and, as she was a spiteful old creature, she determined to make use of what she had found out. The very next day she came to the foot of the tower at an earlier hour than that at which the prince usually came, and, imitating the prince's voice, called out to the maiden to let down her hair. When the maiden did so, the witch caught hold of the long plaits and climbed up. She climbed into the room of the princess and told her to have nothing to do with the prince, since he was a false man and a false lover. But fortunately, the maiden was wise enough to disbelieve her words. When the time drew near for the prince's visit, the witch let herself down again and disappeared. But the maiden told the prince how the witch had entered her room by cunning, and how she had tried to poison her mind against him. The prince was alarmed when he heard this, so the next day he arrived with a carriage and pair and a long ladder of rope, and persuaded the maiden to run away with him. She was quite willing to do this, and said good-bye to everything in the tower before she left. But she forgot to say good-bye to the broom. She took with her 3 gifts which her godmother had given her at her christening: a little bottle of water, a little bag of stones, and a little box of sand. Soon after they had gone, the old witch returned to the tower and called out to the girl as she had done before. But there was no answer. "She is sick, she is sick," cried out the chairs and the table. But the broom, which was very angry at having been ignored when the maiden left, came to the window and cried out, "It is not true, it is not true. She has gone off with the prince." When the witch heard this, she started running as fast as she could in order to overtake the lovers. The maiden, who was feeling rather anxious, put her head out of the window and saw the old witch pursuing the carriage. Thereupon she emptied her little box of sand out of the window. Immediately it spread and spread till there was a sandy waste between them and the witch. But the witch managed to make her way over the sand, though not without great difficulty, and again pursued the carriage. The maiden, looking out of the window again, saw that she was getting nearer and nearer, so she emptied her little bag of stones onto the road. Immediately there rose up a huge wall, so high and so thick that you would have thought no one could ever have surmounted it. But the witch managed to get over, though she did not find it very easy. When the maiden, looking out of the window yet again, saw that the witch had managed to climb over the wall and was once more close behind the carriage, she poured out the water from her bottle. The water turned into a great rushing river, which ran right across the path of the witch. Now, it is a well-known fact that witches cannot cross running water, and so it proved in this case. The witch stood on the farther bank, raging and shaking her fists, but she was unable to ford the torrent. When the carriage arrived at the gates of the city, which was the capital of his kingdom, the prince told the maiden that he must go to his palace and announce to his court that he was bringing home his bride. It would never do, he said, if you were to enter the palace without being suitably received. In a short time I will come back to you, but meanwhile you must remain hidden away. A beautiful tree grew near the gates. It stood beside a fountain, and the branches of the tree hung over the basin of the fountain, and were reflected in its clear water. The prince helped the girl to climb up this tree, and left her quite comfortably perched on one of its broad branches, hidden from passers-by, and shaded from the heat of the sun. Not long after the prince had driven off, a dark-skinned gypsy woman came to the fountain for a jug of water, and as she bent down to fill her jug, she saw the face of the maiden reflected in the water. She thought it was her own face. "How lovely I am," she said. "Why should I carry water? I will break my pitcher." And she broke her jug into pieces against the rim of the fountain and went away. But before long she returned with another jug, having thought better of it. Again she looked into the water, and again she saw the same lovely reflection. "It is true," she said. "I am the loveliest of women. Why should I carry water?" And again she broke her jug against the rim of the fountain and departed. But before long she returned for the third time, and this time she had a tin jug with her. Once more she saw the lovely face in the water, and once more she thought it was her own reflection. But this time she was unable to break the pitcher, as it was made of metal. This made her very angry. She threw the pitcher away from her. "Lie there," she said. "I will fetch no more water." She did not go away, but stood staring about her. And at last she looked up into the tree, and there she saw the lovely maiden sitting among the branches. "What are you doing up there all by yourself?" she asked. "Two is company. I will come up and join you." And she climbed up the tree and sat beside the maiden, and inquired how she came to be in such an odd situation. And the maiden told her how she escaped from the tower and was waiting for the prince to come back and take her to his palace. And when the gypsy had heard the tale, she remarked, "What beautiful hair you have! Let me undo it and comb it out so that you may look your best at the court of the prince." But as she undid the girl's hair, she stuck a long pin into her head, whereupon the girl turned into a white dove, which flew up into the air. But the gypsy girl remained sitting in the tree. When the prince returned, he was very much astonished to see an ugly, dark-skinned creature sitting among the branches. "What has happened to you?" he said. "When I left, you were as fair as a lily, but now you are browner than a withered leaf." "It is your fault," said the gypsy woman. "You left me here for hours in the sun, and the sun has burnt my fair skin and made me brown." The prince was not very happy about this, as he felt sure that this was not the girl whom he had left in the tree. But a promise is a promise, and, moreover, the whole court was waiting to receive him and his bride. There was no other maiden to be seen, so he drove away to his palace with the gypsy girl. Every day a beautiful white dove would fly into the palace garden, and, sitting on a branch of a flowering tree, would say to the gardener in its soft cooing voice, "Tell me, gardener, how fares the prince with his brown bride?" And the gardener would answer, "Not too badly, but what is that to you? Be off, lest harm befall you." And one day when the gardener met the prince walking in the garden, he told him about the white dove and its strange question. "Snare the dove with a snare of green ribbon," said the prince, "and bring it to me." So when the dove came the next day, the gardener tried to throw the snare of green ribbon about it, but the dove was not to be caught. "No, no," it said, "you will not catch me with a silken snare." When the gardener told his master of his ill success, the prince advised him to try a snare of silver. So when the dove came the next morning, the gardener attempted to throw a silver snare over it. But again he was unsuccessful. "No, no," said the dove, "you will not catch me with a silver snare." Again the gardener was forced to relate that he had been unsuccessful. "Try yet once more," said the prince, "but this time let your snare be of gold." So the gardener made a snare of gold and tried again to catch the white dove, and this time he was successful. The prince had a lovely cage of fine gold and precious stones made for the white dove, which he kept in his private apartment, and one day the gypsy woman came into the room and saw him caressing it, and was very angry and jealous. "I wish you would do away with that bird," she said. "I do not like it." But the prince had grown fond of the pretty, gentle bird, and would not hear of such a thing. And one day, as he sat with it on his shoulder and was stroking its head, he came upon the head of a pin hidden among its feathers. He pulled the pin out of the bird's head, and immediately it turned into the maiden of the tower. She related to the prince all that had happened to her since he had left her in the tree, and how ill the gypsy woman had used her, and how she had deceived him with her false tales. The prince was most happy to have found his true love again, and wanted to punish the gypsy by putting her to death for her wickedness. But the maiden would not have it so, and persuaded him to banish her instead to a far country. This was done, and we will hope that she lived to repent of her wickedness. But the prince and the fair maiden were married at once, and lived very happily ever after, of course. Thank you once again for listening to this story. If you enjoyed this story, please press that like button. Also, please help an old storyteller out by subscribing to my channel. The next story will be posted in a few days, so until then, may your story continue to be a good one.